Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. With just 19 days to go before South Korea's 21st presidential election on June 3rd, the race is intensifying not just between the candidates, but also in the minds of voters still weighing their choices. Jae-myung of the Democratic Party is currently leading in national polls, while Kim Moon-soo of the People Power Party and Jun-seok of the minor New Reform Party are both vying to reshape the conservative field in very different ways. But beyond party lines, this election is taking place in the long shadow of a constitutional crisis, rising economic anxiety, and growing public demand for trustworthy leadership. Tonight, we delve into what's really driving this race, how voters are shifting, and what the candidates are proposing for the next administration. For this, we are joined by attorney Jun-seok here in the studio with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also joining us online is Choi Han-san, professor of public administration at Myeongji University. Great to see you.
Good evening.
So, Professor Choi, let's begin with the overall picture first. The Democratic Party's Jae-myung seems to be leading in major polls lately, but Korean elections often shift dramatically in the final days. So, based on your past observations, how reliable do you think are these early numbers, and what kind of voter movement typically happens in the final stretch?
Is there a surprise or not in this 2025 presidential election? That is a very interesting question. I think that there won't be a surprise, I think, but Lee Jae-myung has maintained a steady lead in the poll since former President Jun-seok impeachment. So today's poll conducted by the MBS, Lee Jae-myung 49% and Kim Moon-soo 27%. I think 22% difference according to the Joseon-ilbo. So I think this is a very critical numbers, I think, right now. Also, the Lee Jae-myung has a big support from the consolidated liberal base, but while the Kim Moon-soo, the conservative, the vote is still fractured. So I think the 18 days left is not a short period of time, but you cannot say easily something happened like a big surprise. But polling the blackouts during the final 6 days of this campaign mean the late voter shift cannot be fully measured, especially like youth or the undecided or independents. So I think that still there are some chance, but I cannot see right now any sign or signals some the big surprise happen in the remaining time.
Right, so it's still early to tell, and as of now, there aren't as big signals for a change. Now, staying with the electoral map, Attorney An, Kim Moon-soo and Jun-seok, who are both conservative candidates, have decided to run separately. So in practice, how do Korean voters usually respond to these kinds of divided field? Do you think they consolidate around one candidate or still hold their ground?
Well, I guess so, as the Professor Cho mentioned, that it's kind of early to predict, and we have 90 days, so it's kind of a long time in the election period. And throughout the South Korean, political history, consolidation of candidates has been a hot issue. So every time there's a nationwide election, such as the presidential election this time, and there are people who looking at, watching closely what really happened, whether the consolidation of candidate happens. But very interesting, if you look at carefully what really happened after consolidation, each cases, the results are not quite promising, and sometimes it worked very well, and sometimes it didn't work so. So it's really case-by-case situation. That means that the candidates will be carefully select what to do, whether or not they consolidate or not. It depends on the situation. So what Professor Cho mentioned is that this, because the recent poll, I think that the Lee Jae-myung, three candidate setting, Lee Jae-myung about average 48%. And then Kim Moon-soo has about 30% average, on average, right? Some polls showing 33%, some is 27%. And then lastly, the Jun-seok is about 7% on average. So even if you add up both conservative candidates, that's about 10%, at least 10% below the Lee Jae-myung. So it's quite, I guess that it's not really big advantage for any the conservative candidate to I don't think there's a very strong incentive for any candidate to consolidate because they want to win the game, not just become a loser, just joining after joining. So that's issue. Also, plus more importantly, that many voters or the Korean people remember what happened last weekend at PPP, and then some of leaders of PPP, unilaterally, attempted to replace Kim Moon-soo with Han Duk-soo. That's really bad signal to the undecided group and then independent groups. I think that's really big impact because any sign of further attempt to consolidate the candidate in the near future might be a more negative impact to the undecided group or the independent groups, right?
Right, so it's not really always helpful to put all the eggs in one basket. Right, and now the question will be whether the split will energize or fracture the base. Now, all of this is happening against this very particular backdrop, Attorney An. This is a presidential election that follows a constitutional crisis, and of course, the martial law controversy from the former President Yoon-seok. How has this shaped the public's expectations about leadership or trust in political institutions?
That's a very interesting question because I ask myself, and I guess sometimes it's very difficult to answer that kind of question because we really get a big picture. But I think that after the December 3rd martial law declaration and then the eventual impeachment of former President Yoon-seok, and the Korean public has learned some lesson from it, right? I think that now people are looking for new leadership. We hear the term new leadership doesn't mean new people, right? It means the new standard should be applied to the president. So I think about the main, maybe perhaps three major standards should be applied for the new president. The first one is the moral and ethical standard. It's very interesting to see, if you look at the Yoon-seok, right, he's the former chief prosecutor of South Korea, right? He knows what the legal system, he knows the best of it, and he knows the dark side and any bright side, everything inside out. And then the problem, what happened was that, there was some people saying that the reason he declared a martial law because he tried to prevent, the prosecution against his wife, and some issues about family issues keep coming, and the mother-in-law and brother-in-law and wife, and so much family issues. And to me, it's to other international observers, looks like a nepotism issue, something nepotism, and transparency issues. That's really now Korean public looking at, we need something higher standard, something higher than legal standard. Because when you say legal standard, it means that you have to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, saying that legally prove it. That's very difficult and time consuming. So now I think it's Jae-myung having similar situation because there's litigation going on, criminal and civil litigation. That's things people are looking at. I think that might be the main factor on this election is that moral and ethical standards should be applied. And the other thing is the communication skill. That's really, I felt very sorry for the Yoon-seok, and I feel also actually I feel very bad for Yoon-seok because I think he's the worst president in Korean history, had the worst communicator. And very often I was confused what he's trying to say. And sometimes, and there's a plus, and then maybe, you don't have to be really good speaker or speech or good speaker or the presenter. You can hire good team, right? But I think that my impression was that whatever bad thing happened to Yoon-seok administration, and he kind of messed up, and then the people working for him, it even make it worse. They don't even know how to handle the situation. That's really bad. I think that's the next president and the future president should have a better communication skill. And lastly, and the national unity. Previously, Korea is historically is very politically divided country. So it's a north and south, and even south, southwest, and southeast, right? So divided. So it's kind of, it has for past several decades, right? And whoever get division, take advantage of the division, they got take advantage, and they got elected, and they use the same strategy throughout their term. But however, now we're saying that it should be something different, something someone who bridges the gap. So something united people. I think that's a really key factor. Will people look at it from the next president?
So higher moral standards, better communication skills, and national unity. Now, let's also talk about voters who often shape the outcome. Younger and independent voters have shown more flexible voting patterns in recent elections. Sometimes they shift from, parties based on specific issues or policies. Professor Che, how are campaigns this year trying to reach these voters, and do you expect them to play a decisive role again?
Yeah, I think that both Lee Jae-myung and Kim Moon-soo has prioritized young and independent voters as a key swing blocks. Especially Lee Jae-myung promised housing for the youth and the military, the service credit toward their careers, and the 4.5 days work week. I think that is a very good message, especially recently he also tried to focus on the unity message. I think the independent youth, maybe they like to hear unity, because we are very fractured, but it is time to we are united. Kim Moon-soo also very ambitiously for the youth and the independent, and especially youth. He focused on the reduced student lands and the housing plan and special policy for the youth job protection and pension reform. I think that's very attractive. So both candidates has a very attractive promise. I think we can see the polls show that Lee Jae-myung is leading strongly among the youth, young voters and the independent, and unfortunately Kim Moon-soo is still remain only for the older conservatives. So maybe 19 days, 18 days left. How the Kim can manage that is the key. I think that recently the recent vote is especially president election in the 2017 and 2022. The youth vote is really swing the vote. So I think it's very critical. So I think that this year, 2025, also youth very important part of the election.
Right. So indeed, these young and swing voters may not really follow traditional party lines, but they could really still tip the scale. Now, let's also touch upon the policy front, Professor Che. The three main candidates offer distinct visions for the economy. Lee Jae-myung supports large-scale public investment. Kim Moon-soo promotes tax cuts and deregulation, and Jun-seok emphasizes local wage flexibility and leaner government. How do these policies reflect their different philosophies on economic recovery?
Yeah, they are different. Also, they are very distinctive models. Lee Jae-myung proposed the growth plus social equality, while Kim Moon-soo says market-driven maybe economy. Also, Lee Jun-seok focus on the structural reform, reduce the ministry, something like that. I think Lee Jae-myung maybe focus on the maybe recovery, because we are now the very critical and crisis time. He says maybe 100 trillion Korean won AI and the tech investment and the green growth and housing support and 4.5 days work week, and he tried to maybe transformative the growth maybe through the maybe government intervention. But while the Kim Moon-soo more like a market oriented, he says lowering tax and then maybe easing the regulation and then more freedom for the business, and this kind of the issue maybe also very attractive for the market. Probably the Kim tried to minimize the state role, and that he tried to put the market. I think Lee Jun-seok is a very unique idea. I think why he says keep saying about the reduce the maybe the ministries and then the small government. Maybe he focused on the efficiency. I think that this is a very long-term idea, but still Lee Jun-seok has a very attractive ideas. Maybe many voters thinking about Lee Jae-myung, Kim Moon-soo, or the Lee Jun-seok. Yeah.
Right. So from big government spending to deregulation to structural reform, these economic blueprints reveal, very differing governing styles, of course. Now, staying with economy, another area of wide divergence is pension reform, of course. Attorney An, Jae-myung wants to improve the current model. Kim Moon-soo backs automatic adjustment systems, and Jun-seok proposes a dual-track overhaul. So from a governance standpoint, how feasible do you think all of these are?
That's a very interesting question because the National Assembly passed the amendment to the National Pension Act, which will be effective from next year, January 1st. And in that amendment, actually, the key point was that you pay more and get paid more, the idea is. So the problem here, the government is facing is that who's going to pay more and who's going to get paid more. That becomes the generational divide here. So just what Professor Choi mentioned several times, these teenagers and young voters is a swing voter traditionally, and they are very sensitive about the pension reform because it will affect. And then the three different approach made by the three different candidates, but they're not, they're saying something, but I'm not sure whether they really solve the problem issue because that we running out of money, the pension money is running out not because of overspending, it's more like because of the society changing, the population is decreasing so fast, and that the trend will be, it's supposed to be continue to decrease for time being, means that we will be facing even worse problem in 5-10 years later. So we'll have to see what happens. So, for example, Jae-myung say you want to improve the current model. Well, yes, sure. But I think one of the things he mentioned is they try to ease the burden on the next generation, younger generation, so creating more credit to the youth, right? So if you go to serve army, you get the serve army credit, and if you get married and new family, we give you new family credit, and then sometimes if you're the young first timers, well, we give you, basically you waive your duty to pay pension, something like they give the benefit to try to give more benefit back to the payer generation. Well, however, the Kim Moon-soo case, because I think that his party is really focused on the senior classes, I guess they are focused on payee classes, seniors, right, which over 60s and 70s, because they basically say that automatic adjustment means that sounds very academic, but I don't think it's realistic because that we regionally assume at this moment that Korean population will decrease even faster in the future. So that in that sense means that the next generation will have the heavier burden and heavier and heavier. So if you say automatic adjustment, the current senior level will get paid enough, but the payer level, the younger generation will be suffer more. That's really bad for the young, generation. I think he's gonna lose a lot of vote because they got only 20% because of this kind of policy, I think. And lastly, Jun-seok, I'm not sure whether you really understand the situation. Dual track, you're dividing the national fund not in half. I don't think that's really, I think it's a bad idea, really, because you running out of the money already, you divide it, and it will get worse. You try to get focus on something, and I think maybe you try to increase the base. Maybe that's the idea. I think the more regional. But if you divide it, not even half, it will increase the generation divide. The serious situation. I think that's very more concerning.
Right. So it seems all of these candidates have very different points of views, and pension reform, of course, is very urgent, but it's going to be really hard to structurally make changes on that. Now, let's also touch upon environmental leadership. Professor Choi, Jae-myung pledges to phase out coal and expand renewables. Kim Moon-soo emphasizes nuclear energy and climate resilience. Well, Jun-seok has not really released a formal climate or energy policy yet. How might these differences shape South Korea's environmental direction?
I think the Lee Jae-myung proposed the decarbonization and then the more increased renewable energy is which fit to the global trend, and then we must meet our goals for how we can reduce the carbon emissions. But unfortunately, Kim Moon-soo and Lee Jun-seok says nothing about that. Also, while the candidate Kim Moon-soo says a nuclear-led strategy, and he said 60% of our energy should be like based on nuclear energy, it seems like some kind of copy of the former President Yoon Suk-yeol. Also, that remind me former President Jun-seok never understood about the renewable energy 100%. So I think still the PPP, also Kim Moon-soo has not realized what world and global is now has a trend. So I think this is a very critical moment. I think in the part of the environment issue, South Korea should be survive with this global trend because it is all related to our economy. We sell the semiconductor, we sell the something is based on the renewable energy 100%. I think the Lee Jae-myung and maybe Democrat Party they says about that, but I cannot say anything about from the PPP and Jun-seok. So that's very unfortunate. So I think that this is a very critical issue because we are industrialized and we are number 13th in the world in the economy. So I think that we must maybe keep the goals for how we can reduce our emission in the future.
Right. So this energy issue is really important, and South Korea's energy future, of course, would be decided by the ballot, whether through renewables or nuclear or something that's yet to be decided. So we'll have to keep close eyes on that front. But I'm afraid we will have to conclude our discussion for now at this point. Thank you so much for your insights, Attorney An.
Thank you.
And of course, Professor Choi, we appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.